As a small business owner, have you ever felt overwhelmed by the pressure of choosing the right hire or leading a team? Or have you ever found yourself tolerating a bad hire because you fear trying and failing again as you repeat the hiring process? If so, you're not alone, and you are in the right place. Welcome to the Growing Your Team podcast. The Growing Your Team podcast teaches business owners like you to expand your unique business by teaching you to master the hiring and team management process. Hiring and managing a team does not have to be a challenge. You just have to learn to do it right. And the Growing Your Team podcast teaches you how to become a confident leader who hires right every single time. Now, let's jump into the show where each episode you will learn tips on how to identify what type of help you need on your team, how to source amazing candidates, how to conduct interviews that lead you to your ideal team member, how to onboard successfully, and how to lead every person in your business so you have a team of rock stars who you are happy to pay every single paycheck. So let's jump in and teach you how to hire like a pro. Hello, Jamie Van Kuyk here, and welcome back to the Growing Your Team podcast. Today, I have on guest Elizabeth Lotardo. This is actually Elizabeth's second time on the Growing Your Team podcast. And funny enough, we're on episode 250, and she was on episode 50 for her first appearance, so exactly 200 episodes between her last appearance. But today, Elizabeth and I are talking about something a little bit different than her first appearance. We are talking about the concept of self-leaders. But before I get into a little bit of that, let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a consultant, writer, and online instructor who helps organizations drive emotional engagement. Her new book, Leading Yourself, has been called a refreshingly candid playbook that helps you create a work experience worth loving right now. With an undergraduate degree in advertising from Boston University and a master's in industrial and organizational psychology, Elizabeth works with senior leaders, frontline managers, and entry-level teammates to create more purpose-driven work experiences. Her clients include Salesforce, DraftKings, Hilton, and numerous Berkshire Hathaway organizations. She is also a popular LinkedIn learning instructor who designs workshops on topics like leading without formal authority, finding your purpose at work, and leading yourself. Elizabeth writes for Harvard Business Review, and her work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and on NPR. So back to the topic of today's conversation. So we are talking about self-leaders. 90% of the clients that I work with, if I ask them what are the must-have qualities of their new hire, one of the top things they say is my team member must be a self-leader. They want someone who is driven. They want someone who is a go-getter and someone who doesn't wait to be told what to do. The problem is self-leaders are made. They weren't just born that way. And someone who is a self-leader in another organization might not end up being a self-leader in your organization if you don't set them up for success or allow them to be a self-leader. So let's jump into the conversation with Elizabeth so you can learn how to create a team of self-leaders inside your organization. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Growing Your Team podcast.
Jamie, I'm excited to be back.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. When we reconnected, I can't believe it's been almost 4 years, possibly by the time this comes out, right around that 4-year mark, maybe a little more. I don't know, since you've been on the podcast last. I can't believe how long it's been.
So much has changed for both of us and for the entire world in that last 5 years.
Right. So before we jump in, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a researcher, a consultant, and a training designer with a focus on emotional engagement. In my new book, Leading Yourself, is all about finding joy, meaning, and opportunities inside of a less than perfect job. So whether you are a business owner and find your job less than perfect some days, or whether you want to help your team feel more inspired in their roles, that's the playbook to do it.
Yes, yes, I love it. I feel like it's always one of those things where, we were kind of chatting about this before we jumped on is, we always want people to feel inspired. We want people to feel empowered in their roles. We love our businesses. It's our babies and everything. So we want people that are going to come in and have the same passion, have the same drive,
Yeah.
be a self leader just like us. And it's like, and then most people are disappointed by the results because they don't know what to do or how to do that, how to create the environment, how to find the right people in order to actually create the environment that is going to work best for them and matches their vision.
Right. And if you're a business owner, self-leadership probably comes pretty naturally to you. You are likely an innate self-starter. You find the opportunity inside of a change and you have that big, bold vision. And it can be disappointing to say the least when your employees don't share that level of ambition because you rely on them to make your vision come to fruition.
Yes. Yeah. And there's so much of that. It's like so true. I really think there are sometimes two types of business owners. There's a type of business owner that they're just like, I am tired of working for people and around other people, and I just want to work by myself. And they're the ones that are typically more kind of, I would say, fall into that freelancer and contractor bucket. They have no
Mhm.
visions of really growing their business, growing a team, maybe working with that one-off contractor occasionally, but they're just like, I want to be in control. I don't want all that people aspect of it. But then there are, as you said, that other group that's that self leaders that you're like, I am that ambitious person. I drive. I want to make something for myself. I have these big visions for my business. I want to go, go, go. I'm going to grab whatever I can. I'm going to make my own success. And it's going to be huge. It might be small. It might be whatever. It's going to be whatever I want and whatever I make it. And yeah, like when we're those types of people, I feel like, 'cause I know I fell into this trap like early on in my leadership career. We just assume that everybody else is like us, that
Yeah.
everyone else, if I'm a drive go getter, everyone else is like that too.
And there's no fault in not being like that. I will point out, not everyone is meant to start a business. And perhaps if you did start a business and you were that to your second bucket of business owners, that inspired, that driven, that motivated person, and you're feeling more like the first, like, oh, I just want to get it done. Everybody leave me alone. I don't want to deal with the people element of this. You're not alone because so often inspiration is fleeting. And when we bump up against things like hiring and accounting and cybersecurity, whatever your not sweet spot of running a business is, it's easy to feel less than purpose driven.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded is early on in my career, I hit this crossroads where I could go into management or I could go into sales because the position I was in, those were the two most common paths. And an opportunity for both came up at the same time. And it was like, which one do I apply for? And I remember making the decision, I'm going into management because I want to learn leadership skills because I'm going to run my own business. And I can always hire someone to be the salesperson. Because in my mind, when I was envisioning the corporation, the company I was eventually going to own, it had lots of employees. It had a sales department. It had all these things, forgetting that when I started that business, it was going to be just me and I was going to have to
You
wear
are the
all the
sales
hats.
department.
I was going
Yes.
to be the sales department and the leadership department and the client execution department and everything else like in between. And it was just like, oh, so sometimes I feel like you hit that messy middle in a business where it's like you have to do it, even though you don't want to do it. And you're just like, I didn't start a business to be a salesperson. I started a business for another reason, but I have to do it in order to get to that spot.
And I think a lot of people feel the pressure to grow their team, the pressure to develop training, the pressure to create a great company culture for a lot of people, that's the bucket that they were not stoked on when they started their business. Perhaps they were really excited about a new technology and that's their business. Perhaps they're really excited about a customer aspect. A lot of times, this bucket of how do I get all of my employees to do, say, and behave in the way that I need them to grow my business is that category that is less than exciting. But it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a super great point. It's, it's sometimes realizing where you are, what you need to do, what skills you need to grow, what you need to do now in order to get to that next level. And that sometimes tough times are temporary, but we need to work through them in order to get to what we want.
Absolutely. And, leading yourself was born out of my own struggles to firstly find an identity and feel empowered inside of an organization. And then later in my life to create that feeling in other people. My work with emotional engagement and the work I do with clients is centered around how can we create meaning, joy, and opportunities inside of a less than perfect role. Because every role, from business owner to front desk employee to someone managing billing, has less than exciting elements of it. And we need that sense of meaning, joy, and opportunity to get us through it.
Yes, yes. So I want to jump right to something that we were talking about offline. So I feel like this is such an important thing, and I want to make sure that we address it and it doesn't get buried later in the episode. Is, we talked about, okay, so we have this drive, we're ambitious, we have all these things, but you mentioned earlier, we want people that are going to jump in, take responsibility, do all of this. But we also, in a lot of ways, have zero risk tolerance when it comes to mistakes.
Right.
And I've done a lot of research lately about delegation and why, especially as women, we fear delegating. And that is one of the number one things that comes up is the fear that other people are going to make mistakes and that we don't have control over the mistakes that they make, but yet we feel 100% responsible for it. And then that responsibility a lot of times comes is, well, if I did something differently, that mistake wouldn't have happened. Or if I held on to it, that mistake wouldn't have happened. And that fear holds us back from a lot of times getting the support that we need. And so tell us a little bit more about that, kind of like that zero tolerance for
Yeah.
mistakes, which holds us back.
Well, the quagmire is, and I hear this all the time in my clients, is I want my team to feel empowered. I want them to take initiative. I want them to be a self-starter. On the flip side of that coin is if anyone makes the smallest mistake, there will be hell to pay. So when you zoom out and look at it from the 10,000-foot view, it's easy to see why people don't step into empowerment because the risk is too great. So if you want people who are empowered, who are taking agency, who are coming up with ideas, who are executing without you holding their hand, you have to have tolerance for some mistake. And I, as a business owner, as a person who has worked for several people, I know this quagmire is challenging, and something that always helps me is to remind myself there is risk in staying the course and doing it all too. It's just
Right.
not as obvious. It's a little bit less growth every year. And again, you don't see it like you do someone making a big typo in a client presentation, or like someone missing a deadline for one of your customers, or not doing the process the way you would have done it. Those are really obvious. The cost of not delegating, of not empowering your people is less obvious, but it is huge.
Right. No, it totally is. Like, it reminds me of like one of the things I always talk about, kind of like the cycle of micromanagement, that where people are like, I don't want to be a micromanager. I don't want to have to micromanage my team. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Well, then you have to create an environment where you're not micromanaging and they're not waiting for you to micromanage them. And they're always like, well, what do you mean? I was just like, well, you create an environment where you train your employees that they cannot move forward without your word, because if they move forward without you saying something, you ask the questions of like, why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that, and things like that. So they learn that in order for me not to get in quote unquote trouble, I need to wait for my manager to tell me what to do. I need to always wait for their approval. I can't do anything without their word. And then you get frustrated as the manager because you're like, they won't do anything without me. And it's like, but you've trained them to be that way. You reprimanded them for moving forward. You reprimanded them for doing something without your approval, even if it was the right thing to do. So now they're waiting for you. So you need to break that cycle and you need to teach them that, okay, there's a learning period where I need to teach you what's appropriate. I need to teach you the boundaries. I need to teach you my expectations. But now that you know my expectations, me as the manager, I need to release control and let you run with it and understand that not everything's going to be 100% my way, but it doesn't mean it's a mistake. And mistakes are going to happen. We all make mistakes. Even if you hold on to everything, you are going to make a mistake. You are going to have to apologize to a client at some point in time because you're late on a deliverable. You screwed up somewhere. Like something happened. I remember once sending a client a document that somehow my computer did something funky, and instead of like the autosave going to where the normal document was, it just started autosaving in a different place, kind of like a recovery area. And I didn't realize it. So when I copied the document that I thought was the final document, it was half a document. And they were like, where's the rest of it? And it was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I know I finished it. Where is it? And doing a big search and being like, do I have to go back and redo all this work? And I was able to find it and send it to them. But sometimes if an employee did that, you'd be like, well, why didn't you double check and open up the document before you sent it
Yeah.
off? And like all
Hindsight's
these things, like you
2020.
could have prevented that. And like all these things, it's like we make mistakes too.
Yeah, and we have the benefit of after the fact knowledge when we're helping our teams recover from mistakes. I want to circle back to your comment around you need to create an environment where people feel safe to step up. Sometimes people don't come to you clean, and you may be cleaning up the mess of their prior manager. So perhaps it is not you that is sentencing them to never step forward. Perhaps it is not you that is crushing all of their ideas and making sure that they never have the confidence to step up. It could have been their prior boss. It's still your challenge to deal with, but I think it's important to recognize that we come to work with a huge, a well of experiences. Most people have worked for different bosses, they've been in different companies, they've worked in different jobs, and all of that plays into how they're showing up for you. Again, not your fault, but certainly your problem to deal with. And to
Right.
undial some of these micromanager tendencies that your teammates may have experienced in the past, take some time.
Yeah, I absolutely love that you said that because one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is even if you're hiring someone that's highly skilled, has years of experience doing what they're doing, you still need to send them through a thorough onboarding plan. And they always view onboarding as training basic job skills. And I was like, no, no, no. We're not necessarily training basic job skills. There's going to be some things that you realize that there's some gaps and you have to train, but it's for some positions and for some employees, that onboarding is simply training them your expectations and how things are done inside your company, because it could be completely different than how things were done inside their previous company. And if you don't set the expectations, if you don't train them on your expectations, they're going to go based off what they know. So their way of doing it right, because of their old boss telling them this is what I want and this is what's right to do this, might be 100% wrong to you. And you're like, why are they doing this? But if you don't set the expectation and if you don't reset the expectation once they do it, quote unquote, wrong, because they're doing it different than what you want, they're never going to change their behavior because they're not going to know that it's not what you want if you don't tell them it's not what you want.
Unmet expectations are the number one cause of workplace angst on both sides. The
Yeah.
employee not meeting manager's expectations and the manager not meeting employee expectations. And if either side lets those expectations go unspoken or leaves them hazy, it's ripe for tension. And
Right.
I think one of the big reasons, back to your point around onboarding and saying this is how we do it here, we need to have a close connection to purpose and the reason for being in that onboarding experience. Because without that, these are just isolated roles. And that's one of the big reasons people don't feel empowered to step up is they don't know how their role fits in the context of the organization, why it matters, and the impact that they're supposed to be making in that role. And the more clear a leader or business owner can be about here is our why, here's our purpose for a business, here is how your part makes an impact on that, and here's how your part has a ripple effect on all these other parts, they unleash a level of creative thinking and engagement that isn't possible without that contextualization and that feeling of purpose.
Yes, yes, I love that. It kind of ties back to some of the things I always talk about is when you're early on and you're creating those expectations and you're getting ready to train on them, I always say, think of the why. Why is this important? And that thing of if all you can think of is because I said so, or it's the way I've always done it, then sometimes it's personal preference. It doesn't actually need to be done that way. So your why should always tie back to things that matter and things that matter to someone other than just you. This
Right.
is
The why
yeah.
cannot be to make you more money.
Yes. Yeah, it needs to be like one of those things of it needs to be done this way because these are the expectations we set with our client. Clients hire us because we are the firm that does XYZ for them. We are the firm that does this. One of our core values is always on-time delivery. So in order to achieve on-time delivery, this needs to be done this way by this date, even though it's 5 days before the overall due date, because here are the things that need to happen after this is done and things like that, where there really needs to be that why, tying back to your core values, tying back to customer expectations, tying back to safety and regulations and whatever it is, where it's not just because I said so.
Exactly. The because I said so phrase is, I think, so triggering for a lot of people, myself included. I guess they would say elder millennial, like on the older part of the millennial generation. And I feel like every teacher growing up was a because I said so teacher. And what's beneath that is being too tired to explain an actual reason. And that's something that a lot of business owners feel too, and something I can empathize with. But without the contextualization, without the meaning, people are one, going to check the box just to not piss you off and get reamed out by their boss. They're going to disengage over time. They're going to fail to see why this role matters. They're going to lose their emotional connection to it. And they will eventually either depart your organization or be a lasting energy suck inside of their team.
Yes, yeah. And I think the other thing that makes me think about like with the because I said so is you might be talking about situation A, but when you explain it to them right, and especially when you get kind of those self leaders and those critical thinkers, they're able to connect it to situation Z, where they're like, oh, that's right. Like, because of this, we have to do this way. Hey, this somehow is related to that. If we do things differently here, it's going to impact this. So this is why this needs to connect here, because this is really like one of our core values or one of these things that's safety. We've never talked about it over here, but it has to apply over here as well. So you're able to help them think in that more critical, higher level way versus just do it because I said so, but I'm not going to give you any information why. So you can't apply it to anything else. And then I'm going
Right.
to feel like you don't really know what you're doing because why didn't you critically think about this? And it's like, but you're not giving them the tools to critically think about things. Because I know for me, like, I always relate it back to like with having kids. And sometimes people will be like, well, your kids should listen to you because you're the parent, you're the authority. And I'm just like, if you say something, they should just follow directions. And I'm just like, but I've always had the kids that want to know why. I've had the kids that have had very strong logic. So when you explain them why, like they understand, and then they're able to apply that to other situations as well. They know when it's appropriate to ask for things. They know when to not. They're kids, so they're not perfect, but they're able to see things as a bigger picture versus, well, someone of authority told me this, so I'm just going to follow the rules.
Right. There's a big difference between compliance and commitment. And as a business owner, you are going for commitment, and that is a longer game. You want commitment to your values, commitment to your purpose, commitment to the goals. That's what you're trying to foster. And it really is pay me now or pay me later. I have a 1 year old, and we definitely struggle with the pay me now, pay me later, because in the cadence of daily business, you have a billion things to do. And when someone says why, it's easy to be like, "Yeah, because I said so." Like I have so many things to do, but you pay a steep price for that later down the line when you fail to contextualize things. The way we bring up people to rise to the occasion, the way we empower our teams to get things done is through that contextualization and showing why it matters.
Yes, yes, exactly. Okay, so I want to get your insight on this. So we talked a little bit about self-leaders, hiring self-leaders, being a self-leader. And I feel like another way that if you are that really strong self-leader yourself, now you hire this other self-leader, releasing the control. I know this really came to light for me. I was part of a leadership program where we were in a 6-month program with 39 other people where most of them identified as strong leaders, self-leaders. And all of a sudden you're working on these projects together where everybody is a natural leader and you having to learn to let go and realize that I don't need to be in charge of this in order for the whole to be successful. I just need to focus on my thing. And it was a challenge in this program. And it was one of the things where I said, like, that was one of my biggest growth is realizing that other people are capable of leading as well. But I feel like it's different once again when it's inside our own business and it's our revenue on the line. It's our personal income on the line. It's our baby that we built on the line of how do we let go and really let someone else be the leader that they are trying to be and then they have the capability of being.
So there's a couple of strategies you can use to overcome that mental hurdle. And it is a tough one because intellectually, we all know that we shouldn't bottleneck. Intellectually, we all know that we can't do everything ourselves if we want to grow the business. On a day-to-day basis, much harder to implement. So the tactics I fall back on, the mindset tactics, are what is the worst that happens? And that sounds like it would lead you down a really scary road, but so often we realize that the actual worst case scenario is not as bad as the pit in our stomach would lead us to believe it is. If you let someone run with this marketing campaign and it doesn't work, what is the worst thing that happens? You lose some money. Maybe your brand reputation is a little hazier temporarily. It's recoverable. And so often when we push ourselves to articulate exactly what we are afraid of, instead of sitting in that just general anxiety of I'm not going to have control over it, we realize it's not that scary. Another thing you can do is articulate the upside. As business owners and as people in general, we are designed to avoid risk at all costs. So we naturally know this is a risky situation. I don't want to have anyone else control it. I want to do it all. I want to minimize the risk. But when you proactively point your brain to articulate what the potential upside is, sometimes you can see how substantial the win in that situation is. So let's go back to someone owning a marketing campaign, for example. What is the upside if they own that and it is successful? Perhaps they feel even more empowered and come up with more ideas. Perhaps your customer relationships grow even faster. Perhaps you get a better ROI on your ad spend than you would have otherwise. There are big wins to be had with this. Our primitive brain points us to the risk. And again, there's merit to articulating exactly what we are afraid of instead of just sitting in general anxiety, but also forcing our brains to consider the optimistic alternative can be that final push we need to let go of some control.
Right. Yes. Yes. I love that. And I think like when we're looking at that risk, like there are probably some people out there, as soon as you talked about like a marketing campaign, it could potentially, negatively hurt your brand for a little bit. People are like, oh, wait, wait, wait. Like, what are they putting out there? And just because you let someone lead in their role doesn't mean they have to lead in a silo where you're not having some sorts of checks and balances. They
Right.
can be coming up with the marketing ideas, they can be doing all the execution, but there could be opportunities where they're giving you updates, they're presenting to you and everything. So that way you know what's going out. You know that if there's something where you're like, oh, wait, 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 that goes completely against who we are, our values. I don't want that. You have the ability to stop it.
Great
And
call
and
out.
Yeah, and give some like additional feedback. Like, you don't need to be involved every step of the way and make every decision, but you also don't need to be like in the dark with every decision. You can let that be that kind of checks and balances.
Yeah, I am not suggesting giving your social media intern an Amex Platinum and telling them to go crazy with all of their sponsored TikTok ideas. That is not the point of relinquishing some control. The intent of this exercise to accurately articulate what you're afraid of, the worst case scenario, spell it out. You will likely see it's not that bad, and force yourself to look at the upside is to give space for people to bring their ideas, to bring their skills, to bring their execution to the fore, because in absence of that space, they will disengage.
Yeah. And it reminds me of one of my positions back in corporate where I said it had like the biggest positive impact on me as a leader. I had a manager that gave me so much authority and responsibility over my team. I didn't operate in a box. Like I'd go to her all the time. We'd have our weekly check-ins. We would talk all the time. I was always running ideas by her. And there was a lot of like, yeah, Jamie, that's a great thing. Like go and do it. But then there was also those times where she said would say, like, that's a great idea, but it's not, we can't do that, or that's not going to work exactly as is. And here's why. And she would give me the more information that I didn't have in my position because I wasn't a part of all the conversations that she was in. Like this was a large, like, um, it was international company. I wasn't a part of everything. We're not talking about a small business where it's just like, well, why wouldn't I know that stuff if I was paying attention? Like there were so many pieces of the puzzle and I didn't know everything. Or there would be some things where maybe they would try it, they've tried in the past and it didn't work. And she'd be like, okay, we tried something similar to that in the past. Here's the information about what we did and why it didn't work. So she would be, I'm not against doing something similar and trying again, but we don't just want to repeat the exact same thing that didn't work. We need to maybe do a little bit more digging of why that didn't work and how we can take it a different way in order for it to be successful this time. So she didn't stop my ideas. She gave me the more information that could help me be better at coming up with ideas and coming up with those project plans and coming up with ways of leading the team. And I felt very empowered in the role.
I love that example, and it's easy to see in that example what would have happened if she didn't respond that way. If she shut down your ideas, if she didn't give any context as to why they wouldn't work, if she didn't give you the autonomy and the empowerment to go find another solution, over time, the research would suggest you will stop putting forth ideas. And that's in the shorthand, some business owners may be like, yeah, because I need all the ideas, so I don't need anyone else to have ideas. It's fine. But in the long term, we run a huge risk of disengagement when we stifle the voices of our team. Even though those voices are not always accurate, even though they don't operate with the full picture in mind, even though they may not have the practical, the financial guardrails that you as a business owner have in the forefront of your mind, they still need to be heard because in the long run, it really matters for engagement.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like I did some of the same things like with my teams. It was like, I had a team member that would bring up ideas all the time. And it was, how do I help, you know, harness this? Like some of his ideas wouldn't work. Then they wouldn't work because once again, I had information that would show why they wouldn't work. Or he'd bring up things that would be like, well, what about this risk when we were going to go try something new? And I would be able to give them the information. It's like, yes, they thought about that. They went and tested that. They examined that. Or sometimes we know that's a potential risk. So it's actually on their list of, as we go to implement this, this is something that we need to look for and we need to stop as soon as it's coming up. And because it was all that information and just being able to say, not your ideas are stupid, shut up, like I don't want to hear them. It was like, yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We're thinking about that. He continued bringing up ideas and he ended up being very innovative and helping us see new ways and helping sometimes bring up risks that we didn't even think about. And he was really impactful because we were able to harness his ideas and his energy and his self-leadership and everything in ways that empowered him, even when we weren't always going with what he said.
Exactly. And that is the essence of self-leadership. It doesn't mean that you're relinquishing all your control. It doesn't mean that people aren't accountable to you as their boss. What you want is people who are leading themselves, who are inspired, who are accountable, and who are actively pushing towards the purpose of your organization. Because only with that energy is growth possible.
Yes. So a question is, okay, so we're small businesses. Sometimes things change. So what we wanted and what we saw our growth today is different than what we're going to, the path that we realize that we need to be on a year from now. So I feel like sometimes we get really comfortable then with people. We get really connected with people. So how do we make those changes when needed to say, all right, yes, this is where we were going. Now we're going someplace else.
Well, you can say we're a small business and sometimes things change. You could say we're a large enterprise organization, sometimes things change. We're a solopreneur, sometimes things change. The world is changing rapidly, and businesses of all shapes and sizes are being forced to pivot and reevaluate their next couple of years. I think when it comes to inspiring the level of self-leadership you want to see inside your organization, I'll go back to that contextualization point we made earlier. Explain the reason for the change. So often, what happens is a business owner or leader inside an organization will be looking at the big landscape, this big picture of multiple factors, what technology is doing, what finances are doing. And they fail to cascade that to their team. And you don't have to spell out every detail, but if you're asking your team to change direction in some way, you need to explain why. Again, we can't just say because I said so. Your team likely has a good bit of trust in you, otherwise, they wouldn't be working for you. But the more you explain the ripple effect as to why you're making this change, the more likely they are to agree with it and execute on it. Because so often changes make more work for us. They make for a steep learning curve, and they make for some frustrating moments because we're not used to it. It's not what we were expecting. And without seeing a reason for it, we're less likely to push through those things. Again, a couple more sentences in the long run, but it really is pay me now or pay me later. Because the last thing you want to run into is as a business owner, 4, 6 weeks down the road, looking behind you and saying, why didn't y'all do it? Like I said, we were going to make this change. The reason they
Yes.
didn't do it is they didn't see the reason for it.
Yeah, they didn't see the reason for it. Sometimes they don't think you're serious with it, especially if you're a person that's always coming up with new ideas. Is it just the idea of the week? One of the things I think that I just want to stress about what you said is, the kind of the more you communicate that why and everything behind it, the more likely they are to be behind the change. And sometimes with small businesses, we don't have a lot of seats at the table. We don't have a lot of seats at the bus. So sometimes those changes mean that the seats need to change as well, which means the people need to change. And I feel like that's one thing that holds us back is we're like, but we're attached to these people. These people have done really well for us. This person's amazing at what they do. But the question then becomes, are they who I need? And sometimes we get stuck in that. How do I keep my people and implement this change and somehow force them to be who I need them to be? And I think when we're really clear about why we're making a change and then what we need from our people in order to transition to this change, sometimes there is that realization on both sides and that acceptance on both
Yes.
sides that this isn't the right place for people, and people will gracefully exit or more gracefully handle that conversation that their role is going to be ending when they really understand what you are doing. When you've been that person that explains that why all along and they know that this is well thought out versus just like a snap decision, and that they're going to go on and they're going to do something better and different for another organization, but they still value every moment that they've worked with you.
Absolutely. And they're much less likely to take it personally when they know that there is a reason for the decision. And again, as business owners, you're busy. And it seems like because I said so, and because you should trust that I looked at all the factors, and because this is my business and this is the way I want it, it seems like that should be enough. But it isn't, not enough to scale. We have to be able to inspire the people around us. And for them to be inspired, they need the context. Why are we doing all of these things? What's the reason for the change that we're making? Why does my part matter to this? And only then do they rise to the occasion.
Yes. All right. Well, I have one more question before we wrap up because we're getting close to our time. And this is one of the topics that I think I know you talk about and everything. And I think you address in your most recent book. But prioritization and urgency, I feel like sometimes we get into that thing where we have a million things on our plates. And sometimes I know our employees feel this way too, and everything feels urgent. So, what advice do you have when everything feels urgent? How do you tackle it? What do you do? How do you get through it?
So there's lots of schools of advice on how do you handle it when everything feels urgent. And the advice I follow is not the norm, but there's a real important reason why I follow it. It's advice I actually read about from Meryl Streep's husband. So Meryl
Okay.
Streep, the actress, her husband is a sculptor. And in an interview, someone was asking Meryl, you get these complex things, these roles, where do you start? Is it the lines? Is it the mannerisms? Is it the accent? Is it how you physically portray yourself? How do you break this down? Because all of these parts are important. And she said, I follow the advice from my husband, the sculptor. He says, start where it feels fun. And that seems counterintuitive because as business owners, we're schooled to start on the highest level, most strategic element of it, or to start with the most pressing problem. But to me, starting with what feels fun, even if it's just working on what feels fun for an hour, is so important because you need energy to get through the rest. And when everything is feeling urgent, it's easy to feel tired. When you jump into the part you're excited about of that big slew of urgent priorities, you're going to fill your own cup, and that's going to enable you to more clearly see the rest of the things you have to do and to execute on them faster. It's true in the macro as organizations when we're overwhelmed and no one is excited about anything, we're in this paralysis state. It's true in the micro as an individual. When we look at our to-do list and everything feels draining, we're never going to get through it. And starting where something feels fun, again, even if it's just for an hour, can help you see the rest of your to-do list with more clarity and have the energy to actually get through it.
Yes. Yeah. I love that advice. I feel like it is spot on. Like, we need to like what we're doing.
At
We need to
least
make
at the
sure.
start. I mean, there's going to be elements of business ownership and of working for anyone that are not fun, but
Yeah.
making sure you do something that is fun first is going to get you the serotonin in your brain. It's going to ignite your frontal lobe. It's going to give you some quick hits of dopamine and all those feel-good chemicals that are going to help you see the rest of the things with more context and have more energy to do
Yeah.
them.
And I feel like that's also important when we look at it and we look at what we need to be delegating in our businesses as we're growing our businesses. I always say, like, when people are trying to figure out what do I delegate next, what position should I be adding, is what's always getting pushed to the bottom of your to-do list because you don't enjoy it or it
Right.
feels like a chore to get through. So when you look at this and say, well, if I'm going to focus first because it's a way to tackle my to-do list on what I enjoy the most, that might be one of those things that you hold on to. Like, let's not delegate that to someone else yet. Let's not keep the stuff that feels like a chore and delegate the fun because we want to enjoy our business.
Well,
So,
and
yeah,
we know enjoyment and performance are closely correlated, right? If we hate every second of the process, the odds of us producing a successful output are quite low.
yeah.
Versus if we're having fun and we enjoy it, we know our creativity is better, our strategic thinking is better, and the outcomes are generally stronger.
Yes, exactly. And I think if we get to a point like with your employees too, if they're overwhelmed and you're helping them do that as well, kind of see, okay, what's the fun? What lights you up? Where can we start? It also helps you with your management of them. So if there's I need to delegate something more. This is a one-off project. Okay, I have 3 employees. Who should it go to? All right, well, this employee loves this type of work. So it's going to energize them. They're going to love this side project. They're going to see it as something exciting. If I give it to this other employee, they hate that type of work. They're going to look at it like I just, you know, I don't know, took away like precious time from them and they're going to hate it and they're going to complain. And it's like, so when you get to know that about your employees as well, you can tap into who should help you, who should take on as roles are changing, who should take on that role because they have the passion for it.
Absolutely. And leading yourself depends so much. I've said the word engagement a million times in this conversation, but only when someone is engaged are they able to come up with those ideas, to be the self-starter you want them to be, to execute in a way that is powerful and strong instead of just complying to whatever their bosses says. And knowing
Yes.
what lights them up is a real important factor in that. And the same is true when we're leading ourselves as business owners, knowing what gives us energy, what we find fun, what we find inspiring, making space to do more of that, and recognizing that delegating the rest of it may pay off in the long run. That's where the magic really starts to happen.
Yes, exactly. All right, Elizabeth, we're near the end of our time today. So tell everybody how they can get in touch with you.
You can visit my website at elizabethlotardo.com. My new book, Leading Yourself, is on Amazon. It's about how to find more meaning, opportunity, and joy inside the job you already have. Whether you are the business owner or whether you have teammates working for you, it is the playbook to own your role. And also, when you order it on Amazon, you get a free video summary. So if reading is not your style and listening or watching is, there is that way to adopt this mindset as well.
That's good. All right, Elizabeth. My final question. I know you've answered this before, but maybe things have changed since we've talked 4 years ago. We've all had leaders or managers that have stood out to us. Think of a leader or manager that stood out to you and share one thing about them.
So I'm going to share a different leader or manager than I did 4 years ago because this is an experience that came into the front of my mind recently. When I was in college, I worked as a literacy tutor, and I tutored adults who struggled with English. Most of the population I worked with was Spanish speaking. And I had a boss there who was so good. Her name was Barbara Colson Clare, at contextualizing. And I think that's a red thread we've touched on in this conversation, always bringing to the fore why this matters, what impact it has, why the part you as an individual are playing is so important. She did that so frequently. I never lost sight of the purpose of my job, my lowly tutor job inside this big swirling nonprofit organization. She was always drawing back to the larger purpose. So through schedule changes, through setbacks, we had this big curriculum problem one year. We were all tethered to the impact we were trying to make. And I didn't realize at the time that that's what she was doing. I just knew that job felt really fulfilling to me. And in hindsight, I see so clearly how purpose-driven leadership changed my experience as an employee. And I hope to be able to instill that in other leaders too, so their employees feel connected, like they matter, and like they're making a difference inside of their job every day.
That was so important. And it's one of those things people talk about all the time is they want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to feel like they matter. There's that purpose. And I think it's really one of those things that make employees want to stay and continue being good employees.
Absolutely. It taps into our own, what we know to be true. We want to matter. We want to make a difference, and we want that to be able to show up at work.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us once again on the Growing Your Team podcast. And anyone that wants to go back and listen to Elizabeth's first episode, it is episode 50. So go back, listen to that one as well, so you can hear more of the wonderful things Elizabeth has to share.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Are you ready to hire a new team member for your business, and you want to ensure you hire the person who can succeed in the role, make you happy, and positively impact your bottom line? Then let's talk and see how growing your team can help you master the art of hiring. Through bespoke hiring frameworks and comprehensive guidance, you will learn how to attract candidates who have the passion you desire and the skills needed to succeed. At Growing Your Team, women entrepreneurs and leaders work with us to help them expand their unique businesses by teaching them how to hire like a pro. Let's connect and see how we can help you. Send me an email at jamie@growingyourteam.com. That's Jamie, JAMIE @growingyourteam.com, or head on over to growingyourteam.com/jumpstart, with jumpstart being all one word, and let's talk about how you can become a confident leader who hires right every single time.